Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. This month, our look at Big Finish's 60th anniversary special, Once in Future, continues with Time Lord Immemorial, released in October of 2023, written by Lisa McMullen, directed by Helen Goldwyn. Time Lord Immemorial stars Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor and David Warner as the Unbound Doctor. Also featured in the cast are Nicola Walker as Liv Chenka and Gina McKee as the Lumiat. As always, I am putting a blanket spoiler warning in place because I do these unscripted and I may decide to talk about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled for this story, then in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website where you can buy Time Lord Immemorial. And this is a very good story. This is one of the stronger stories in this series. In fact, ranking time again, because I always seem to open with ranking these, my current ranking now is The Artist at the End of Time is still my favorite. And then number 2 is Time Lord Immemorial. Number 3 is Two's Company. Number 4 is The Martian Invasion of Planetoid 50. And number 5 is A Genius for War. And number 6 is Past Lives. It's really good. Time Lord Immemorial is really good. It's admittedly got kind of a basic story, but it's really bolstered and saved by the performances, all of which are spectacular. The focus of the story this time is the Ninth Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, who is doing something really interesting in terms of performance here. Throughout most of this series, all of the Doctors have kind of been playing themselves with really one notable exception. I kept going back and forth between noticeable and notable. Back in Past Lives, Tom Baker was playing the Eighth Doctor, and it's one of the best parts of that story. Here, Christopher Eccleston is doing something unique with his performance as the Ninth Doctor that took me a few listens to pick up on, because Eccleston is one of the most subtle Doctors. I think it's one of the reasons some people have had issues with his stuff on Big Finish, because on TV, Eccleston is one of the most nuanced, subtle Doctors. You know, he's not bombastic, he's not theatrical. Okay, he's not as bombastic and theatrical as some of the other Doctors, but he is very nuanced, he's very subtle, and some of those subtleties you don't quite get on audio. Now, the thing I noticed about Eccleston's performance in this story is there's no mask. Essentially, Eccleston is the PTSD Doctor. You know, he is the one coming right off the heels of the War Doctor. The War Doctor committed terrible atrocities during the Time War. So, you know, right after the war ends and the War Doctor regenerates, Eccleston is kind of the one who has to live with that. He is the one who has to shoulder everything everything the War Doctor did in the Time War. And it kind of becomes apparent as the Ninth Doctor's journey goes on that happy, energetic, happy-go-lucky face he puts on is a mask that hides a lot of his pain and trauma. Now, if the premise of Once in Future rings true, and the Doctor who was hit with the degeneration weapon was the Eighth Doctor, as we've been speculating, that means that the Doctor has not committed those atrocities yet. So the happiness and the energy that Eccleston plays is earnest, it's sincere. There is no hint of a mask here. And again, just for the Ninth Doctor, it is kind of unique to see that. And like I said too, because I listened to this story a couple times to prepare for this review, it wasn't something I picked up on at first. Also, you know, just Eccleston plays great off all of his co-stars in this story. Who do I want to go to next? I guess I'll talk about the other big aspect of this story. This is a multi-Doctor story. You could argue that Once in Future in its entirety is kind of a multi-Doctor story, but this is like this is really the true multi-Doctor story of this particular series. And it is a type of multi-Doctor story I have wanted for a while, because this story sees a team up with a quote-unquote canon Doctor and the Unbound Doctor. I think I brought him up a couple of times in unboxing videos and possibly one of my, top 10 most anticipated release videos. I can't remember now. So I am going to talk about the Unbound Doctor a little bit here. Okay, so 2003, Doctor Who's 40th anniversary. 2 years before the revival series was set to air. Big Finish did an anniversary series called Doctor Who Unbound. This was a series of what if stories. Basically, they were not canon. I keep doing air quotes because canon in Doctor Who is really bizarre. And it was Doctor Who doing what if. Like, every story had a different what if premise. Like, what if the Doctor had never left Gallifrey? What if the Doctor believed the ends justified the means? What if Doctor Who never made it to television? One of these stories, Sympathy for the Devil, had the premise, what if the Doctor had not been Unit's scientific advisor? In this story, the Doctor was played by David Warner. And then he showed up again in a sequel, Masters of War, and then a few years down the line, he showed up again in The New Adventures of Bernice Summerfield as a Doctor from an alternate universe. And he teamed up with the Seventh Doctor companion, Bernice Summerfield. David Warner would play this role and do that series until his death last year. This is the final performance from David Warner. And knowing that going in, this release is a little melancholy, I do have to admit. But Warner is giving it his all, and his performance is still really good. Like Eccleston, he has scenes where he gets to play off all his co-stars, and he is great in all of them. It's just sad, too, knowing what he was going through at the time. He passed away from cancer. And it's just, you can hear how sick he is. And it is a little sad. And he is putting his all into this, like I said. And it's really sad, too, because there are times, especially on my first listen through, especially in those early scenes, where it doesn't even sound like him. But it's admirable that he put his energy into this story and gave such a great performance. I'm going to move on now because I don't want to focus on that. Just, again, Warner is great. He played off of Eccleston really well. He played off of Gina McKee really well, and he played off Nicola Walker really well. That's all I wanted to say. For his final outing, he delivers a swan song. Speaking of, I kind of mentioned this, I think in Martian Invasion, it might have been Two's Company, that every story in this series has kind of had an element of pointless fan service for the sake of anniversary. In past lives, it was Sarah Jane. In Artist at the End of Time, it really was Jenny. In Genius for War was the closest to not, but you could kind of argue it was the General. And Two's Company, it was Harry. And Martian Invasion of Planetoid 50, it was Strax, who I really only think was there because he can't really break up the Paternoster gang. Here, it is Liv, but at least the narrative tries to give her a purpose to being here. Now, I have never talked about her before, so if you're new to Doctor Who, or if you're new to Big Finish Doctor Who, I need to talk about this really quick. Liv Chenka, played by Nicola Walker, is a companion to the 8th Doctor. She first showed up in the 7th Doctor story, Robophobia, and then showed up again in the 2nd volume of the first 8th Doctor story arc, Dark Eyes, where she became the 8th Doctor's companion. She has stuck with him since then through all of his major story arcs from that era, Dark Eyes, Doom Coalition, Ravenous, and Stranded. And then she's still with the 8th Doctor through his reboot, as Big Finish rebooted into sort of their box set era. Before they put Liv on hold, they didn't even give her an exit, they just put that story on hold. And even more recently, she has showed up a few times as a companion to the 9th Doctor. Now I remember. If you break down her story, if you break down those box sets, into their individual stories, I think Liv might now be Doctor Who's longest serving companion. Couple of caveats with that. One, because she isn't an expanded universe companion, that opens the door to for the expanded universe to be counted, which means some TV companions could possibly have still been serving longer. Also, that is just also my estimate there is purely by story count, because Classic Who was serialized. If we go by episode count, it is Jamie McCrimmon. All of this to say that Liv Chenka is one of my least favorite companions. I really do not like Liv at all. My theory on her, just seeing how she's played out so far in the Eighth Doctor stuff she's been in, it seems the approach to her is to do a cynical companion, like Romana or Turlo, a companion who more questions the Doctor, is a little more snarky, and just overall very cynical about the adventures they're on. The problem with Liv is that, unlike those other cynical companions, she lacks the qualities that make them enjoyable. So, Liv, whenever they're on an adventure, just complains or replies with snarkasm and snide remarks. It gets annoying, and she just seems like she doesn't want to be there, and it's just generally unpleasant to be around. And this story is the most I have enjoyed Liv ever. I think because she is really toned down here, so she's not as obnoxious as she normally is. I was talking about this in Discord with some others, and they speculated that because this was the Unbound Doctor, this story was originally supposed to feature Bernice Summerfield, and they speculate that Liv was written like Bernice Summerfield. I can't weigh in on that either way, but it's a reasonable theory, and it's especially given that, again, through a lot of this story, Liv really doesn't seem like Liv here. And that leads us to our final star in this story, the Lumiat, Gina McKee. If you missed my review of Missy Series 2, let me break this down, hopefully really quickly. The Lumiat is the Master's Valeyard, essentially. After the events of The Doctor Falls, and again, this is all explained in Missy Series 2, Missy tried to pull a Roger Delgado and come up with a way to unnaturally extend her life after John Sim tried to kill her. Only instead of creating Jeffrey Beavers, she created the Lumiat, a distillation of all the Master's good into a single being, which is where the Master's Valeyard comparison comes in. So, and then, just a little tangent here, throughout that story in Missy Series 2, the Lumiat shows up and try to put Missy on her alleged redemption arc. Missy's redemption arc in Series 10 is really poorly done. The Lumiat tries to put Missy on her redemption arc early, culminating in Missy killing her. And then, of course, by the end of the story, the Lumiat has kind of realized that, trying to redeem the Master, who she is ultimately futile and not worth it, and combined with the sort of anger at the idea of Missy killing her, the Lumiat herself regenerates into the somewhat nihilistic, extremely angry, extremely bitter Sacha Dhawan. That being said, in the future, I hope we get more stories with the Lumiat and the Doctor. Her and Christopher Eccleston have this amazing chemistry together throughout this story. They make a really good Doctor-Master dynamic. And it really makes me want to see the Lumiat paired with other Doctors in the future to see how they would play off each other. Gina McKee might actually be the standout performance in this story for me personally. It's really tough to call because Christopher Eccleston, David Warner, and Gina McKee all give really strong performances. But hearing her on her own, away from Missy, you get a much stronger feel for the character. The Lumiat is essentially... Gina McKee plays it a lot like Michelle Gomez, with that manic, chaotic energy, but applying it towards good. So she's very bubbly. What's a good comparison? She's Kristen Chenoweth. She is Kristen Chenoweth. But yeah. Other than that, like I said, the story itself is nothing to write home about. It's kind of basic. So in the last story, the Doctor discovered this compound called psionic sand. Don't need to know anything about it. It's just a MacGuffin. and he learned that Missy was using it to try and stabilize her own degeneration because psionic sand is what the degeneration weapon was made out of. And, Missy told him that, Missy told him that the degeneration weapon was made out of psionic sand and to find the Union. So it turns out that whoever made the degeneration weapon didn't just steal psionic sand. They stole the literal sands of time from the Time Lord Immemorial. I'm not going to get too deep into that plotline. Just know it's fine. But I will say this. It is nice to have a bit of Time Lord mythology that isn't just Rassilon or the Doctor. Because, especially in New Who, it feels like every time we get a piece of Time Lord mythology and the founding of the Time Lords and so on, it always feels like it either ultimately comes back to Rassilon or the Doctor. So it is so refreshing to have Time Lord mythology that isn't that. But as I was getting to, when the Union stole the Sands of Time to make the degeneration weapon, they set forth a chain of events that would lead to the collapse of the multiverse. So that is basically all Time Lord Immemorial is. It is the Doctor, the Lumiat, Liv, and the Unbound Doctor trying to correct that mistake and put the multiverse back in order. And in that regard, too, because when the multiverse is fixed, it leaves the Doctor, Liv, and the Lumiat in place, and it sends the Unbound Doctor back to his universe. It is a nice send-off for David Warner's Doctor. And we get our final reveal from the Lumiat. The Union is a person. Prediction time, calling it now, because a person is calling themselves the Union, it's going to be a Time Lord. Just watch. I really don't think I have anything else to say. Time Lord Immemorial's strengths are all in its phenomenal performances from its 4 leads. But those are just my thoughts. Have you heard Time Lord Immemorial? What are yours? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you'll find a link to my socials where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. And join me next month when we will look at either the penultimate or the final story of Once and Future. Because there's another story after it, but everyone says that story, Coda, the final act, is more of an epilogue than an actual story. Regardless, it is finally, after being suspiciously absent through most of Once and Future, it is finally the 8th Doctor's turn in the Union. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.